Welcome to Railway Legends, Myths, and Stories. I'm Kevin Standley. Before we get into the legends, myths, and many stories we hope to bring you about railways, it might be a good idea to go over some background and explain some basics about what is a railway, what is a train, and the other equipment and related material that makes up railroading. So let's go back in time. Where do railways come from? Simply put, it is much easier to pull a load over land using some sort of wheeled vehicle. Another way is to use a boat, but we're not talking about water transport and canals here. If you want to know more about water and canal transport, there are many wonderful videos about canals and ships. Here we will be mostly talking about trains and railways. What I would like to do now is to look at predecessors to railways. Way back, we see here an example of a permanent way in the form of a road. Paved roads were the best, but paved roads are expensive and not always that easy to build. One innovation for roads were rutways, where the ruts helped guide wagons and carts. These ruts were either wore down or put there on purpose to help guide wagons through curves or narrows. Examples have been found that date back thousands of years. Now, we're not saying that a rutway is a railway, but it is a distant relative. The use of a special road that also guides the vehicle on which it travels was a highly useful idea and one that carries on to today. In future videos, we hope to bring you more about this. Let's move forward somewhat along the years. Another ancestor of modern railways are what are often called wagonways. These were some form of built-up road for wheeled vehicles. To make these purpose-built roads as inexpensive as possible, they were often made very narrow. Sometimes they were so narrow as to often be no wider than just the wheels of the carts that were using them. These roads were built of stone or sometimes wood, and many times some form of guide was added to keep the wheels of the carts on the narrow pathways. Often these were built for mines. While this video was taken during World War II, it gives you some idea of what some very early railroads might have been like. Notice the double-flanged wheels running on wooden rails. These wagonways made it much easier and more practical to haul larger and heavier loads. Rocks can weigh a lot, and mining generally involves moving a lot of rock. Wheeled wagons that were made to fit these early wagonways carried the mined rock. Often the wagons were pushed and pulled by people. Others were pulled by some kind of draft animal. While one cart or wagon was not a train, it was found that it was possible for both people and animals to pull more than one wagon. So why not string a number of mine carts together to form a train? This practice happened in so many places that there is little chance to find out who tried it first. And while this may seem more than a bit obvious for the first people to do so, it was a big deal. We will see that mining and railways have had a long and symbiotic relationship. As you might note in this picture, the rails had flanges, not the wheels. Let's look at this a bit more closely. While this is not the kind of track used today, please keep it in mind as we will see more of it later. The main point is that most sorts of wagonways not only supported the loads they carried, but also guided them along their way. There is more than one way to do this. Let's look at some of the ways this was done. In one early example, the double flange on the wheel keeps the cars guided along the rails. Another way of doing this is to have a flange on the rail to keep the wheels going where you want them to go. This system harkens back to the very early rutways. And wait a moment before you discount this system too quickly, for it had one great advantage. A wagon using this sort of track could then leave the special guideway and continue on its own on a plain road being guided by a driver. This is an idea that keeps coming back from time to time. Yeah, modern busways. An early example of a public railway was the Surrey Iron Railway in Great Britain. It was opened on the 26th of July, 1803. It was laid as a double-track system for traffic in both directions. The railway was laid with flanged iron plates fixed to stone blocks, and thus was born the term plateway. The trains included wagons known as chaldron wagons, a name based on an Old English measurement unit, and were pulled by horses. Later, this line was extended as the Croydon, Merstham, and Godstone Railway. Many railways had names that included the major locations they intended to serve, something that still happens to this day. This can lead to very long names, and often names of lines that never reached their intended destinations. For example, in the U.S., the St. Louis and San Francisco, called the Frisco for short, never came anywhere near San Francisco. And that's probably just as well, because as anybody from the Bay Area knows, unless you're talking about a certain city in Texas, you don't call it Frisco. Anyway, the CM&G never reached Godstone. This line was incorporated in 1803. Today, a portion of this line is part of the route of London Tramlink. Another early railway was the Oystermouth Railway Company, opened on the 29th of June, 1804, along the coast near Swansea in South Wales. It is also known for being one of the first to carry fare-paying passengers. Note the single horse-drawn carts. We would call these wagonways rather than railways, as they really had no running rail. But wagonways, tramways, and other older guideways such as this were ancestors of the modern railway. For right now, we hope you can see that there is more than one way to build a railway. The one system that became the clear winner at what we will spend most of our time talking about is this. Now, I'm sure that some of you are saying, yes, we know all about track, but what about steam engines? And yes, railways were being built using steam engines, and yes, we will get to that soon. But for now, I want to get this one fundamental part of railways, the flanged wheel on the rail, for this is at the core of the railway. Until now, speaking of rails, I have been using this to mean whatever guideway was being used, such as stone with iron guides, more often wood, and sometimes wood with metal straps on top. This last could be very dangerous, as the metal straps could come loose from the wood and poke through the bottom of the wagons, a failure known as a snakehead. Because of its high cost, cast iron was rarely used. Cast iron rails, although strong, were brittle and did not hold up that well. The key part is that this system of basic track has stood the test of time. Should someone want to set some sort of date for the rail of railroading, the 23rd of October, 1820 might be a good choice. On that date, the patent for making rolled malleable iron rail was granted to John Birkinshaw of the Bedlington Iron Works in northeastern England. While other materials would be used for rails from time to time, the iron road had arrived. So what pulls the loads along iron and later steel rails? From this to this, the same basic idea has proven its worth. The flanged wheel on the steel rail has yet to reach its limits. Yes, I can hear the yells. Steam! Next time I will get into some detail of the early days of recognizable railways and of the invention of the steam engine. And as always, we'll see you on the train.